Now, we were talking about a couple things. What would you look for in a real estate lawyer? Like, I can give my insight
For
on a little
sure.
bit after this, but
Yeah.
like, what would be the big things that you'd be looking for
Right.
if you were a buyer out there and were looking for a real estate lawyer?
Apart from being from Prince Albert and bald,
Well,
it speaks for itself.
You were bald, I think, when we first met.
I've
too, weren't you? You
I've
were
been bald for an embarrassing. Starting, we're going to go on a tangent.
and welcome to another podcast. It's Beyond the Keys, and today we have another Saskatchewan boy here, Mike Derbowka with Cuelenaere LLP. He's a good friend of ours over the last couple decades that we've been working together.
Correct.
He's going to give us a little bit of an insight on what his role through the real estate transaction are and how he services his clients and makes sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So welcome, Mike.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you both for having me. A little intimidating, sandwiched between two heads of hair like this. I grew my hair out. I did comb my eyebrows, but I still feel inadequate. Now that I have that out of the way, and
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.
it's important. This is
I get it. Yeah.
It's a bit of a legal thing.
Yeah,
Further,
for sure.
I'll give some opinions. In all seriousness, give some opinions here in the legal realm as well too. A lawyer being lawyerly, just making sure that I'll give some opinions and tell people maybe what I think or how I think things work. For all of you listening out there, it's an opinion. No specific legal advice will be given here today.
This is great.
Well, we know why we've got along for all these years. That's for sure. Mike's always been able to help us out with any of our clients, even if it's maybe after hours, where we're being able to give him a call. What does a real estate lawyer do in the transaction, just so everybody can get overall groundwork on what your job is?
For sure. And I should start off by saying, when we talk about a real estate lawyer, technically any lawyer can do real estate in Saskatchewan. If you're a lawyer, typically you're working at a private practice law firm, you can do real estate. Those of us like myself who identify as a real estate lawyer, we can't hold ourselves out as being having a special expertise in something, but fact of the matter is, as you guys know, real estate is what I do. That's 95% of my practice. So as somebody who does a good amount of real estate work, my job is servicing clients. Typically, people are referred to me by realtors and bankers and so forth, and looking after people on a real estate transaction. And specifically, I do residential real estate. So effectively, you're buying or selling or sometimes changing names on title to a property that you own. That's my day-to-day in terms of conducting real estate transactions.
Right. One thing that you mentioned was that you specialize it. And, from my past experience, and I'm sure Greg can attest to this as well, when we are dealing with specific real estate lawyers, is that typically the deals run a little bit smoother. Things are handed over on time. This is, you're punctual. You know exactly what you're doing and I guess the procedures. Right?
Yeah, I'm thinking a little bit about, in explaining my role or how I approach my practice. And often I say to realtors and other people in the business, I try to approach my practice like a realtor approaches your business, where you want to be responsive. As a real estate lawyer, because we deal with timeframes, we know what the timeframes are we're dealing with these days, especially in this market. And it's the idea of being responsiveness, because those deadlines can sometimes be crazy. So it's being able to jump on the transaction, get things done as quickly as possible. And let's face it, sometimes dealing with some clients where I'm reaching out to them for an appointment. Oh, well, I work every day. Well, so do I. Being flexible and responsive to the client's needs to try get the transaction done, even though sometimes, as I say, you have a client who's swimming upstream from the direction of trying to go downstream.
Right. Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Now, there's, we were talking about a couple things. What would you look for in a real estate lawyer? Like, I can give my insight on a little bit after this, but what would be the big things that you'd be looking for if you were a buyer out there and were looking for a real estate lawyer?
Apart from being from Prince Albert and bald?
Well,
it speaks for itself.
You were bald, I think, when we first met, weren't you?
I've been bald for an embarrassing... we're going to go on a tangent here. I was about 20 years old, and I started noticing things happening to my hairline.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so then did you... when was it that we met then? Was it closely after? Did you have hair when we met?
I had no hair when we met. I was probably 22 years old, and I was already...
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I was already like this. Yeah, I wore it proudly. Still do.
I have to admit, so I got into real estate in 2005. I was told I needed to find a real estate lawyer. I phoned around to every single law firm and phoned the top lawyers. Nobody called me back. And I knew Mike from before. I forgot that he was in law, and he got into real estate, and he phoned me and he said, "Hey, by any chance, do you need a real estate lawyer?" And I was like, this is amazing. I was like, nobody wants to like deal with me, right? And it's like, and then look at it, 19 years later, we're working together.
Right.
He was always there, as Ryan says it, to answer our clients' questions and our questions and to be there. And so for me, I mean, he's going to answer what should you look for in a real estate lawyer. But for me, it's experience and also someone you trust and that you like working with, right? You have fun with a lot of our clients, and people enjoy your personality,
right? Even
though you do make fun of our hair every single time.
I try.
Clooney,
Clooney.
I always wonder what you're going to say to the clients. All the good
you know,
fun,
and in all seriousness, in part of it is understanding, engaging every client that you're sitting down with, because my dynamic with one client, just like your dynamic with one client, might be different than another client, right? And sometimes whether that's expressing a sense of humor or not expressing a sense of humor, you kind of develop that after dealing with many, many people for many, many years and doing what I do or you guys do. It's, again, exact same thing. What I do is what you guys do. And part of that is developing that interpersonal relationship with clients and engaging how you're going to respond and how you're going to deal with people as well, too.
Right.
For sure. Big part of it. So back to your question about if I'm not doing what I'm doing and I'm buying a house, what am I looking for in a quote unquote real estate lawyer?
Yes.
Well, again, that responsiveness. And my approach is I try with every client. I give every client a quote. So client reaches me, my preferred way of communication. I like to have everything in writing. So client emails me. Often you guys will do your job and introduce me to the client through email, which is a great effective way of communication, right? Hey, Mike, we're referring you so-and-so. Here's some details on the transaction. I take over from there. So with that, if I'm gonna not get back to the client for 3 or 4 days and give them a quote, I'm not helping myself out, not helping the client out, not helping you guys out. So that responsiveness, getting back to somebody right away, giving them that detailed synopsis, giving them a breakdown as to what they're looking at for closing costs, timeframes, and so forth.
We usually get that email from you, I think, within a couple hours. Even sometimes, like we're sending these because, I mean, we're just doing tasks in the evening at 7 o'clock, and all of a sudden you get the auto response at 7:45, and you're already coming back with something to the clients, right? So at least they're knowing that you're going to get back to them. If not, all the information's provided.
For sure, and you know, practicing and doing what I'm doing for almost 20 years now, you better become more efficient at what you're doing, and that's exactly it. When you've done something like that so many times, you should be coming up with efficiencies. So then you're not henpecking out a quote email on everyone. Well, I kind of have precedents saved and so forth. Right. But using those precedents to be able to get back to the client very quickly and give them what they need. So exactly,
Sure. One thing is that I always respect, and I know that you know, even with your experience, is that you're one of the most reasonable lawyers out there for the actual, you know, fees. Can you explain why that you do that for your clients or consumers out there?
Yeah, for certain. Every lawyer, the Law Society kind of prescribes a tariff, so a guideline for what you may charge as a lawyer on a real estate transaction, a purchase or a sale or refinance. I think if you were to charge more than tariff, you have to be advising a client. If you're charging them in excess of kind of what I'll say what a guideline is, you have to be advising them if you're in excess of tariff. I don't think a lot of lawyers exceed tariff as far as I know myself. And I'd say generally the trend, and again, my opinion is most lawyers in Saskatoon and in Saskatchewan, at least for Saskatoon, don't charge tariff. They're less than tariff. Right. For myself, and again, the idea in using the word efficiency, when you become efficient at something, which what I like to think I am in doing real estate, you know, you can gauge your fees accordingly. As I say to clients when they ask me, well, Mike, you know, how do your fees compare to other lawyers? And I encourage people, phone around. If I'm phoning around to get a plumbing job done, I may phone a few different plumbers. An exact same thing. And I'll say this to a client, you can phone and get quotes from other lawyers for sure. I say to clients, I'm not the most expensive and I'm not the cheapest. I don't want to be known as the cheapest. And that's generally how I explain my fees to clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because the lawyers that specialize in real estate are usually more affordable across the board, right? I mean, yours
Seemingly,
is,
yeah.
yeah. And I mean, sometimes if you're dealing with a lawyer that's just based in contract law, you could be paying quite a bit more.
Potentially.
Like it could be sometimes maybe not double the price, but you're at least adding maybe another third or 2/3 on top of it, right? So
yeah, again, from experience where I've known realtors who have referred, or realtors more so who have had somebody buying a house and say, oh, I know so-and-so and I'm going to use this lawyer. Of course, as a realtor, you're not, okay. But then it's happened in my practice where Realtor X has come to me saying, hey, my client got a quote from this lawyer. Okay, well, right. And again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on somebody else's fees.
Yeah,
That's their business, and that's not.
yeah, and I'm not going to say all the names of the
fine.
companies that are the most expensive here,
No.
but very reasonable, and you really get your worth working with Mike as well too. I mean, this is a commercial for him actually. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I like to think with my skill set and how I approach my practice, I think I provide a good value for my services.
For sure. Every single client that leaves you is usually sending me a text after laughing about something and saying, thanks for referring Mike. So, I mean, there's no better testimonial than someone saying thank you when you refer somebody, right? So
it's like, and I have a very short interaction period with a client. You guys have a longer interaction period with a client, but my approach when I sit down with a client and we have a job to do, and for most clients, because again, every client is different. Some you're going to be sitting up at the front of your seat more so controlling and just getting the job done. But it's almost like making those connections. Mm-hmm. You want them to remember you, right? Just like for you guys as well.
So making fun of us works really good. Right?
Whatever is easy. Hey, again, I'm from PA. It's low hanging fruit.
They're like, so my realtor referred this lawyer. This lawyer makes fun of the realtor. Mm-hmm. I can trust him. And this is where we're at.
For 100% professional.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely. So sitting back and having I always say with every client, you have a connection with everybody you meet.
Right.
And I like to try to find that connection. I like people and I like to visit, do the job and make a connection and have a visit and try and be genuine about it, right? Yeah, for sure.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure.
The reason why we work together, hey?
That's right.
So on the other side of things, for buyers and sellers with a real estate lawyer, how do you protect their interest when it comes down to the transaction? Like obviously there's a lot that we've done already. Mm-hmm. By the time it comes to you, what's your job in protecting them through the rest of the transaction?
Yeah, I think it's, the procedures and protocols.
Right.
And again, much like a good seasoned realtor is going to have procedures and protocols, and same thing with the real estate transaction, there are procedures and protocols. For example, something that I do with every single client when I sit down with is, my job is to review title, right? If you're selling a house, if you're buying a house, lawyer's job is to review title, any irregularities, we'll just generally say. So my practice habit, every single client I sit down with, I show them title and I go through title with them because this is important for the client to see. But this is another thing I'm doing it for my own checks and balance once again, because my eyes have been on title, my assistant's eyes have been on title, and I'm going through that with them. That's probably, arguably, that's probably the most important thing that a lawyer's job is in terms of reviewing the actual paperwork, which is title. If you're getting a mortgage, there's the financing documents, reviewing those financing documents, looking for red herrings, reviewing the offer to purchase. And again, my practice habit is when I meet with a client, I review the offer to purchase with the client, right? Fridge, stove, washer, dryer, etc. Oh, I see you need to have the HRV vent replaced prior to possession date. I'm saying this to a seller.
Right.
Making sure the seller, and I actually make a note right on the offer to purchase, discussed with the seller on this date.
Right.
Trying to do what I'm trying to do to my liability, make the transaction nice and smooth. And really, that's the lawyer's job on a real estate transaction, to be paying attention to those details.
Yeah. Well, and you even help us out on, before we were in writing offers certain times on, say, maybe the legality and the way we're writing that offer, the conditions, those kind of things.
Very much so.
Also, I know that I send off all my Schedule Cs to you. So that would be like...
the estoppel
certificate, condo documents, to be able to make sure that there's no red flags in there. What else do we do? Sometimes even a builder's contract, we're going to have you review it and see if there's any different terms or phrases that that we're not 100% with. So you talk a lot about what you do at the office on that kind of side, but there's a lot of things that behind the scenes that you're doing with us, and being able to be punctual and answering those phone calls for us. Sure. makes a huge difference from our clients before they even meet you.
Yeah, very much.
You
For
know?
sure. Like I think that Ryan and I have always cared about doing what's right and always went down to the letter of the law and double check things more than maybe like I'm not saying others, but we double check everything. We've never gotten an issue with the legality of the way we do real estate. But the reason that we've been able to do that is because of Mike. I mean, to be honest, like Mike answers all of our calls, so we're very appreciative of that. And so it's a give and take thing. He helps us out. We send all of our deals usually to Mike,
That's how it
unless
works.
somebody else has got something else,
Yep.
right? So, so we appreciate that. But that helps us answer things, and have learned over the decades of being in the business, right?
Right.
You did mention red herring. What would be like a red herring for
Oh,
like,
boy. Yeah.
yeah, like, I mean, there's some of the things that sometimes people don't think about, but you did mention, and I was like, I kind of know what he's talking about, but he calls it a red herring. So I was just wondering.
Red
what-
herring,
yeah.
I mean, we have standard lenders that we deal with that I'm very familiar with. A general red herring can be almost a lending institution I've never heard of before. You don't know how they operate. You don't know what may be coming around the corner. Sometimes with some lending institutions, you think everything is done, you're ready to complete, fund the mortgage. Oh, they've added a new condition.
After the fact or
After
whatever.
the fact. Not acceptable.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be doing that, but the fact of the matter is lenders say, well, sorry, this is what it is. Which in that case, and again, being responsive, being reactive, trying to get things done as quickly as possible. Maybe earlier in my career, I would go to my client and say, hey, we've got an issue here. Well, what happens when you go to your client? You're going to create a lot of
Yeah.
stress and
A lot of
anxiety.
panic.
Yeah.
That's
You
it,
learn through experience. There are times when I will go to my client,
Yeah.
but instead of that, okay, who's your banker or mortgage broker?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk to your. I don't involve the client unless I have to. Part of that, again, in my opinion, it's nice when there's a local flavor and I'm dealing with people I've all dealt with before and I have a repertoire and established communications with
Yeah,
people in the business, which is a beautiful thing about Saskatoon. Not necessarily that big yet because most of us have all worked together in some
Right.
degree or capacity. But in terms of then reaching out, red herring, okay, all of a sudden the lender wants me to conduct a title search in a different province. This is a real world example from a transaction 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Solicitor to confirm client, we want a copy of title showing the client doesn't own property in Ontario. Well, I can't do a title search in Ontario. This is the last minute, not acceptable. But again, okay, I'm not going to the client. I don't want to create a bunch of stress and anxiety unless I have to. Mortgage broker, not acceptable. Can you please do your job, in my opinion?
Right.
And it was dealt with.
Yeah.
The client doesn't know, doesn't need to know, don't need to stress the client out unless we really have to.
Right.
Kind of seems like sometimes like where people are shopping for that best interest rate at certain points and not even knowing the lenders and that kind of stuff. I get some of that came from Toronto or something like that, and
Yeah.
you can't get the guy on the phone.
It-
Example of a red herring.
Those are red herrings, and it can even be somebody local too, where you're trying to get something done for the client's benefit and nobody's getting back to you, right? Trying to phone, email, but it seems like sometimes maybe in a different jurisdiction where they're dealing with somebody that is more communication challenges.
I never really would have thought of that. So that's interesting on that. But I guess that is your job.
It is. It should be.
It
It
should
is a
be, yeah.
lawyer's job. Yeah, exactly.
So most of our deals run very smoothly.
I
There
agree.
are a couple times where we do run into some things. I know Greg's had possessions that aren't good. I know I've had some issues with possessions, that kind of things. When is it the responsibility of the lawyers versus the realtors? Like, I know that we work together a
Right.
lot of times to create a solution that's going to work for both the buyers, the sellers,
Right.
and make both lawyers, realtors happy, right? When is that point? Is it where things are kind of handed off? Is it when we can't come to an agreement anymore with fighting with the both or negotiating with both parties? Let's say.
Yeah, and this can be after the fact. I guess in the true sense, a lawyer who's understanding their role on the real estate transaction. So my role on the real estate transaction, you're buying a house. Well, I'm arranging to prepare the mortgage documentation, collect your money and send it over to the vendor's lawyer to facilitate possession, transfer title. That's the lawyer's true role to complete that real estate transaction. So technically, on a real estate transaction, if you're having your client actually sign some type of acknowledgement identifying what my role is, after the fact, oh, there's a fridge missing, broken window. Well, technically, and some lawyers will take this position, rightfully so. My job is done. Your fridge is missing. This is a different creature.
Right.
You can retain me to correspond with the vendor's solicitor to try come up with a solution as to why the fridge is missing and compensation and so forth.
Right.
Technically. Okay. My approach to that is, as somebody who does residential real estate, I like to say, thinking about this question, I say to realtors when they phone me and there's a missing fridge, okay, you approach it from your end. I'm going to approach it from my end. Let's hit it from both sides.
Yeah.
Because you may very well get a real estate agent for the seller who says, well, why are we dealing with this? Leave it to the lawyers. Or conversely, I may get a lawyer who's acting for the seller and says, why are you bothering me with this? Our role is done. So if we hit it from both sides, working together to try to accomplish that, sometimes we'll have success. Sometimes we don't have success because the seller says, well, go pound sand. I love that Harvest Gold fridge and I'm taking it with me. You're never going to get it, even though the contract says the Harvest Gold fridge should be there.
Right. And then is it worth then fighting after the point?
Sue them in small claims court for the Harvest Gold fridge is what the recourse is for a breach of contract.
Right.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
Now, in a lot of situations, we can deal with a lot of these things prior to ever getting to small claims and that kind of stuff. But I think that's where, us hitting it from both sides, like you're saying, is that us having a conversation with either the buyer or the seller, trying to get some common ground, and then referring back to either, the other agent that we're dealing with, and then obviously with the lawyers, is that you're right. Is that a lot of times we can find the solution before we ever kind of look at getting small claims, because once the money's gone, it's tough to get back.
It is tough. And so back to my approach, I'll do what I can in terms of those communications. And again, some lawyers, rightfully so, they say, well, why am I going to do this? My job is done. It's a different creature, the fact your fridge is missing. My practice habit is I'll communicate. I'll be sending correspondences to the seller's lawyer. At some point, if it appears as though nothing is going to come to fruition in terms of settling the fridge issue, then at some point I will advise my client, listen, I can't do anything further. I've tried, and now it is a different creature, and your recourse would be to sue them in small claims court.
Right.
Yeah, I don't do any litigation work.
I think, as you said, Saskatchewan's so small. We all have relationships. You have a lot of relationships with realtors, but probably just as many with other lawyers, right?
For sure.
You have
That's
to deal
all part
with
of
these
it.
on a daily basis, and so sometimes just that conversation said, hey, can we figure out an agreement here just to make it easy so nobody's fighting, probably works. And the same thing on our side is if we can reach out, like Ann Odishaw, which was our manager, said your relationship with other realtors is more important than your clients. And at first I didn't understand that. And it's not that we don't care about our clients, but when you have good relationships with other realtors in the industry, it really helps us work out deals that are falling apart and so forth. And it helps our clients in the long run, right? And it's just like, if it's anything from negotiating on a deal or when things go wrong, it's like, okay, how do we figure this out?
That's when you're relying on that.
Because the thing is, it's going to what comes around goes around. So it could then be happening to you a year later or something else.
And it goes both ways.
It does go both ways, right?
Lawyers come to me after the fact. And again, generally, you try to be good with people. And even I'm hands-on, and I email lawyers and I email assistants at other law firms, and it's the exact same thing. You never know when you're going to have a little favor or request from another law firm, and often it can be the assistant who can provide that favor. Oh, for sure, Mike, because you just try to be good with people and do the right things, and it's going to be easier for yourself. But again, you're helping your clients out.
It is interesting, though. I've had it to where you're like, okay, that didn't go well, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, a week and a half later, it's the same lawyer, but on the other side. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this world is small in Saskatoon, right? So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, very much so.
Okay. Well, can you give us some practical advice for our listeners that are looking to choose a lawyer out there? What should they be asking a lawyer? Maybe breakdown in fees, those kind of things, or is it pretty?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for sure, asking for a quote. There's no harm in asking a lawyer. Well, what's your experience? Right? How long have you been at it for? Or what kind of not transactional volume, but are you comfortable with doing residential real estate?
I should have asked that to you a long time ago.
You should have, exactly. That's where we went wrong. Exactly.
I had no experience either.
It's too late now. You don't know any better. Exactly. But yeah, and again, even being able to like communicate effectively with the lawyer, being able to get a hold of them, having a responsive lawyer on the other end of things for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, this has been great. Is that we've realized that you are punctual, that
I got here on time.
you were early.
Thank
you
you.
were early. That you're answering phone calls. That you're actually quite reasonably priced out there. That's probably why those are 3 good examples of why Greg and I have been working with you for so many years. And not to mention, you do have fun with the clients, just like something like we like to do, right?
And we enjoy Mike too, right? So I mean, it kind of goes both ways. I mean, I think that email that our clients also get back and forth when we introduce you, it answers, like, what we try to do is give our clients the best experience and answer questions before they're asked. And I think that email a lot of times explains everything that they need to know, so they don't have any follow-up questions, right? They just usually get the email and say, yeah, I'm good. Mike's good.
Vast majority of instances, and I've tweaked that over the years to try point out, because, for example, I send out that quote email. Right at the end of that quote email, I highlight, if you'd like to use my services, please confirm with myself, Bamford,
or the realtor,
banker, mortgage broker, get everybody on the same page communicating together. Exactly. Right. Precisely. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Mike. This has been a treat as always. I can't wait
for having me.
Our next lunch session or maybe coming on the podcast again. It's always nice to have, a good PA boy on the podcast. Anything goes. If you're ever looking to reach out to Mike, it's Mike Derbowka with Cuelenaere LLP. We will have his details in our comments below, or you can also ask us to get in contact with him for you as well.
Well, his phone number is 306-477-7227. Basically, I phoned that number I don't know how many times in real estate. So, yeah. So, thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.